We're starting a new sermon series. I did title my sermon, I Have a Dream. Not me, but someone has a dream. We're in this new sermon series. It's always exciting to me when we get to do that. We're going to be launching into this series. It will take us till summer. And we're going into the Old Testament. We're looking at really a series on the sons of Joseph, or the sons of Jacob. And often we talk about the story of Joseph. And if you read that story, you'll be like, the story of Joseph and Judah. It's kind of like the in brackets sub part there. Many of you know the Joseph story. If you went to Sunday school or you're familiar with the musical, maybe there's a number of different ways you could have heard it. But this story is a fan favorite. It's often talked about the coat of many colors and given to Joseph, and then his brothers are jealous, and so they decide they're going to kill him, and then they change their mind and sell him into slavery. And so off he goes, and he goes off to Egypt, and he's in the house of someone named Potiphar. And in Potiphar's house, Joseph rises in prominence till he's overseeing everything in that house. And Potiphar's wife gets the hots for Joseph. She wants to get him into bed. And so kids are gone, so we're okay. And he rebuffs her, and when he does that, she falsely accuses him, and he ends up in prison for 12 years, a long time. And he's in prison. Slowly he rises in prominence until he's overseeing the whole prison. And then there's these different dreams. A couple guys have dreams, and Joseph tells them their dreams, and it comes to pass, and they say, "We'll never forget you, Joseph," and then they forget him. And the one guy dies, so there's a reason. And then Pharaoh has dreams, and Pharaoh finds out about Joseph. Someone remembers, I remember Joseph. And they bring Joseph in, and he interprets the dream, and it's amazing. And he rises in prominence again till he's overseeing all of Egypt, just under Pharaoh. And it's this amazing story. And then one day his brothers show up, and they don't recognize him, and he stays in disguise, and he tests them on whether their hearts have changed, and then eventually, ultimately forgiving them and saving them and everyone else in the known world. It's like an epic story. It's going to be so good. Now, in Sunday school, this is often told as a moral tale. We get moral lessons from Joseph, like be good, like Joseph. Run away from adulteresses. Be nice in prison. Forgive the baddies, they might change. And if you're faithful, you might end up famous and powerful. It's my favorite Sunday school lesson. Take it home. If you read that story, though, it won't take you very long before you get to the weird sex story, which has to do with Judah and Tamar. And that's the one we skip when we're doing the Sunday school version, right? There is a story in there that is very surprising and shocking for many people when they read it. And the questions come up, what is all this about? Why is it like this? Why is this in the Bible? What can we learn from it? And we'll find as we dig in that this is a redemption story. People change. This is a God story. He is faithful. It's about what he can do and is doing even when he doesn't talk at all, which you'll find. This is a good news story that God loved us even though we were a mess, and faithfully worked a way to deliver us by his own power and ability. This is the good news, the gospel. It's a gospel story, guys. It's going to be so good. Are you excited? Wow, that was like half-baked, but okay. We'll work on it. Genesis 37, we're gonna open it with Genesis 37, 1 to 11 is the passage we're reading this morning. This is what it says. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he'd said. Then he had another dream and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." And when he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. This is God's word. My big idea this morning is that God is working faithfully in the midst of our messy lives. God is working faithfully in the midst of our messy lives. The story of Joseph is an interesting one. It starts with this statement that it's the account of Jacob, or Jacob's family line. It's translated, or the generations of Jacob. And it's interesting, if you look back in Genesis, every time it says something like this, it ends up talking about the family of that person. So the generations of Isaac is like the kids of Isaac. And so here, the generations of Jacob is his family. That's what this Hebrew word toledot means. It's the generations that are to come. And so I thought it'd be good if we talk about those generations. We go back a little bit and put this story in context in case you're just joining us in church or in the Bible. There's a whole story this finds itself in the middle of. And it starts really, we could go back to all the way to Adam, but if we went back to Father Abraham, as he's known, the father of Israel, Abraham is a good starting place. So there was this guy, Abraham. God comes to him and says, calls him to go to a land that he doesn't know. And so Abraham trusts God, and he goes, there's the flannel graph, Abraham. For you, if this is your Sunday school experience for some of you, okay. And so Abraham follows God, he obeys him, and God makes this promise and covenant with Abraham. This is what he says: "I will make you a nation, I will make you very fruitful, and kings will come from you." That's the summary version, but that's what God says to Abraham. And then Abraham waits and waits and waits, and they start to get old, and he tries, to have a child with a handmaiden, and so he ends up with this son Ishmael, and that's not the son of promise. And then eventually, after a long, long time, in his old age, he has a son with his wife Sarah, Isaac, the son of promise. And Isaac grows up, and God reaffirms his covenant to Isaac, and a promise. He says, "I will be with you, I will increase your number." Isaac also invented gravity with an apple. That was the only picture of Isaac I could find. He didn't, just so you know. Different Isaac. "I will be with you, I will increase your number." So we've got Abraham, and then we've got Isaac, and then Isaac has twin sons. So we have right now, the generations becoming a nation, we have like 4 people. This is not a good start to building a nation. It seems very slow, and you wonder if it will happen. But the sons of Isaac are Jacob and Esau. Those are the twins. And unfortunately, in that story, dad favors Esau and mom favors Jacob. And so there's this family favoritism feuding that's happening. That's your alliteration for today. Family favoritism feuding, okay? And that's like going full on in this family. And the boys, if you know that story, if you were with us for the Jacob story we told last year, we went into this story. They are fighting about the promise, about inheritance, and the blessing. And so there's the story where Jacob goes to his brother and he convinces him to trade his birthright for a bowl of stew. And then later Esau regrets it and is upset. And then later on, Jacob dresses up like Esau and he tricks his blind father into blessing him instead of Esau. And Esau's incensed, and there's all these murderous threats and rage. And then Jacob runs for it. He leaves and he goes off to a different place. And in this other place, he meets the most beautiful girl he's ever seen. He's like, whoa, I want to marry this girl. And he ends up marrying her, but only after he gets tricked into marrying her sister. So he has 2 wives, and there's a whole lot of other conflict that comes from that story. The favoritism continues because Jacob loved Rachel, and he's married to Leah. And so there's this sense of difficulty. They have 12 sons. between the two wives and two concubines, but only two of those sons are from Rachel. So those are the special favorite ones, and the one is Joseph, you can see, and the little baby. After Jacob wrestles God in the river and he gets a new name, Israel, then God meets him again and reaffirms the promise and the covenant. And this is what God says: I am God Almighty, be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. So that sounds like very similar to what God said to Abraham early on. And if we were wondering what is God's dream for people and for all this whole big story, if we went back all the way to Adam, we would hear this refrain over and over and over, and it's be fruitful, God says to Adam. Be fruitful, God says to Noah. I will make you very fruitful, God says to Abraham. And then to Jacob, be fruitful, be fruitful, be fruitful. That's one of the ways we could say God's commission to people is be fruitful and multiply. And then he says to Abraham, you're blessed to be a blessing. And he plops this burgeoning nation right in the middle of every trade route of every main empire and country that's going to come along. It's like right in the middle of everything in the Middle East. That's where he plops Israel. And he longs to have this people who would be set apart for Yahweh, a people for himself who would love him with their whole hearts. And he will be their king who rules in justice. Now, we know it doesn't work out very well, as you know. And this story is a good example of our story and what happens. This human problem. The human problem. Now, if you've ever watched a movie, most people, I think, have watched a movie, and if it's a movie with a lot of conflict and you get to the end and it's a happy ending story, then often we watch it and we're like, oh, we want to be in that part for more. And then the story ends and you're like, oh, I wish you'd show us more about the happy part. Like, what happens? Do they have kids? And do they have we want to know. And everything works out. And that's why we long for sequels, right? And then we watch the sequel. Oh, there's a sequel. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. And then you go to the sequel and you're like, whoa, this is terrible. All sequels, all the time, right? Because what happens? You go into the sequel and it's not just the happy ending keeps going. It's like, they need conflict in the story. So there's a bunch of conflict, right? And usually it's not as good as the first story. And this is what they found. So The Godfather and Indiana Jones, Jaws, Toy Story 5's coming out. That's what I put up there for you. Just the never-ending stories, Rocky. It just goes, some of them are good, some of them are like, wow, okay. This is what we're dealing with. So here we just ended a great story. We had a happy ending. Jacob rode off into the sunset. It was awesome. God is faithful. His promises are secure. His family is expanding. His blessing is assured. And you kind of think maybe we should stop there because it was good. It was good for a brief moment, but the story keeps going and you kind of think it can only go bad now. There's going to end up with more conflict. There's human stuff. I'd love Bible stories to be sanitized, just very clean, good versus evil, a hero versus a villain. This is what I want deep down, is a story that's just a little cleaner. And what we end up with are these human stories where it's very messy. And this is the case for our story. The first thing we see here is there's a lot of family of origin stuff. And when in the Bible God talks about children being punished for the sins of their parents, this is really, I think, a lot of what it means is that the stuff that happens in your family just often keeps getting passed down, and you see it in our stories. Oh, the stuff we struggle with is the stuff I struggle with, is the stuff my children struggle with. And it's a difficult thing. You're bearing fruit in your life, and the question is it good fruit? In this story, we see a history of favoritism. And if we went all the way back to the Abraham story, we can see that between Ishmael and Isaac, the two sons, there's this unhealthy relationship there and competition that comes even to the point where Ishmael ends up having to leave with his mother. They leave the family and go off on their own. And then Isaac loves Esau because of the hunting thing, and Rebekah loves Jacob, and then Jacob grows up and Jacob loves Rachel more than his other family. And then she dies, and it's Joseph who's the favorite, highly favored over his many other brothers. In the story, Jacob gives Joseph this, we call it a coat of many colors, is often what it's called. And in the actual language, the color idea comes from the Greek translation. Actually, the Hebrew word means long-sleeved. So you're gonna have to like revision your idea of what Joseph's wearing, just long sleeves. No, I'm just kidding. We don't know. So like, it was special. There's a specialness to the coat. Were there color? Was it long sleeves? Did it have a special collar, turtleneck? I don't know. But it was not a normal coat. And the giving of it to Joseph meant that he was special, different than everyone else. People have working clothes and Joseph's got a special coat. It sets him apart. When we talk about this kind of family of origin concept in premarital, which I've been doing a bunch with people, it's a really important part of it that we look back at our family and we think about the things that we are being gifted from our family. Some of them are good things and some of them are not so good things. And it isn't about bad-mouthing your family, thinking of like, oh, these are bad things about my family. It's about like honestly looking at your growing up, your story, and evaluating the things that are healthy or unhealthy about patterns and issues and dealing with those things. So my question for you would be, if you could look at your family of origin objectively, as if you ever get married or you are married, your spouse is sure to do. You have a weird family. If you could look at that family objectively and say, okay, here's some of the great things I've gotten from my family, and here's some of the ways maybe we're a little dysfunctional or a little bit unhealthy or maybe a lot unhealthy, and then go to Jesus and ask him. I think there's some places he wants to heal in us, in our stories that come out of our family of origin. A second thing we see is that your responses matter. And in this story, we see that. The Bible puts responsibility for sin on you, on us, each one of us. Things happen to us, and then we respond. And that response matters. You're bearing fruit, and the question is it good fruit? In this story, we see a history of violence. The brothers respond to Joseph and the situation in the family with hatred and with jealousy. These aren't saints either, because if you read back a little bit in the story, you see Reuben sleeping with his father's concubine. And if you go back even further, which we explored that story when we looked at Jacob, when their sister is raped, enraged, the brothers go into this town and trick them all into doing circumcision, and then two of the brothers go in and kill everyone. So a lot of blood on their heads and hands. We're never sure if it's their sister they're avenging or their own pride and sense of honor. In our passage, it says they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him, or the ESV says they couldn't speak peacefully. Like there's no shalom in their life. It's just a lot of hatred and jealousy and then more hatred. I was thinking about the movie The Martian. It's a story that's, I think, a great movie where a guy is traveling across Mars. You should watch the whole story. But in this one part, he's trying to get across Mars, and he's traveling in this rover, and he can't use the heater, but it's very cold. And so he's trying to figure out, how can I stay warm on this journey across Mars? And so he goes out and he digs up this thing called an RTG. It's like a radioactive thermonuclear detonator. I don't know what it stands for, but he gets this thing, it's full of plutonium, and he puts it in the rover with him. So the one scene he's driving without it, and he's like shivering, he's so cold with the heater off. And the next scene he's got this thing in the vehicle with him, and he's like sweating, he's got his shirt off. He's like, oh, this is so great. That's the picture of what happens if you carry your offenses with you. It will warm you. It will warm you for a while. But it's radioactive, and it will kill you eventually. This is what we do when we hold our offenses. James 1:14 and 15 says, each person is tempted when they're dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. We see this pattern in our story as people make choices and hold on to things, and those things give birth to other things. And this story progresses until the family has changed. They're on a path that has altered the course of their family life forever. The third thing we see is your relationships matter. My old YWAM teacher used to say, every problem is a relationship problem. And we would argue, I don't know if that's true when we try to think of problems that weren't a relationship problem at the root. But your relationships matter. They matter. You're bearing fruit, and the question is it good fruit? In the story, we see Joseph and all his relationships, they matter. Joseph he gets this special coat, and he's dad's favorite, and he spies on his brothers, and then he shares this dream, this ambitious dream, it sounds like, and he fails to read the room. He fails to understand the peril. I don't know what he's thinking with his brothers, but there's this brooding violence, this growing hatred. And there's this one verse, it says, Joseph was tending the flock with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them, about his brothers. Now, there's two schools of thought about this. The one school of thought is that Joseph is the perfect character. He's like Jesus, and he's holy, and so he can't do anything wrong. And so in this view, Joseph brings a bad report about his brothers because his brothers are bad. We've already seen they make bad choices, and they're pretty bad guys. So there's lots going on. So when Joseph brings a bad report about them, it's a good thing because someone should say what they're doing. They're into bad stuff, and Jacob should know. And so it's with integrity and righteousness that Joseph comes to share this. Now, on the other side, the other school of thought would say that the word actually is slander. And this word for report is a word that's only ever used to describe an untrue report, something that is not true. And so it's qualified by this word, this adjective, evil or harmful or bad. And so those people on that side would say he's tattling or he's exaggerating, or maybe this is an inaccurate report he's bringing, or at least unfair about his brothers, and that's what makes them so angry. I'll say, whichever side you land on, the question of your relationships mattering is important for all of us. And I would encourage you to look back at your life and evaluate your relationships. Think about your friendships. The history of your friendships, your family life, maybe your marriage, maybe your coworkers, and think about your relationships. Is the pattern in history a good one? Is bearing good fruit? Or is there a lot of brokenness and damage? And if so, maybe that's a place Jesus wants to bring healing to you in. It matters, it's important. And God has a plan. And God's plan is revealed in Joseph's dream in some way. The other night, I had a dream that I felt like was significant. I was at a hotel resort, and we were doing a South Abbotsford Church event at the resort, which I think is the purpose of the dream. We're going to do it. No. And so it was going really well. There are lots of people there. It was really exciting, but I felt agitated and upset. And I went to Garth and found Garth, and then I said, I'm very agitated. I said, but Garth, how will God move? How will people be changed? This doesn't seem like it's enough. And then Garth said, I think we should pray. And I was like, oh, good idea. And then we went down into this other part, and there was grass, and then there's a bunch of benches with people sitting on the benches and one open seat. And so we went and sat down among all these other people at the hotel, and I was getting ready. I bowed my head. I thought we were going to pray. And then Garth stood up, and he's like, oh, God, we don't know what to do. We're looking to you. And I was in the dream, I'm embarrassed. I was like, Garth, what are you doing? Oh my goodness, all these people are gonna know we're praying. And then suddenly I was like, but we are desperate for God to move. And this is the way we see him move. And so then I was like, yeah, okay, I'm in. And then the whole rest of the dream, we're wheeling around the hotel in a wagon. I don't know where it came from, because it's a dream. We're wheeling around the hotel in this wagon, and we're just praying loudly. Oh God, we don't know what to do. We're looking to you, we're looking to you. And when I woke up from this dream, I immediately was like, this is significant. And I began to weep and weep and weep. And I felt so encouraged. Oh, Lord, you know our deep cry. We don't know what we're doing. Oh, Lord, help us. What do? We pray. Oh, we ask you to move, God. Oh, my heart was so encouraged. Back in the day, way back in the day, dreams were significant. They were considered to be revelation. And that was a way that your gods would talk to you, was in your dreams, or your God would talk to you in your dreams. That's why everyone takes them so seriously in the Bible. And 2 dreams reinforce the interpretation. Joseph has significant dreams. A couple things we notice that will bear out for the rest of the story. And the first one is that God is quiet. God is quiet. There's no overt miracles in the story of Joseph. There's just this human family drama, violence and hatred and favoritism and injustice and trickery, and these dreams, a bunch of dreams happening. And this is the first dream in the Bible where God does not speak in the dream. It's just things that happen and they have to interpret. What does it mean? The second thing we notice is that Joseph is quiet. So he does tell them what his dream was, but other than that, we don't hear him processing. We just have to imagine how he feels. Is he rock solid? Does he ever doubt? As we go through the rest of the story, is he going to wrestle with faith and suffering and his own story? We don't know. We don't hear it. So we can only guess, but we don't know for sure. And we wonder, when he shares his dreams with his brothers, we don't know why he does that. So, on the one hand, we could say, maybe it's this secret vindictive desire to get back at them because they're so mean to him. So he's like, oh yeah, you're mean to me, but I had a dream one day you're gonna bow down to me, okay? R.C. Sproul calls that the dark view of this. Or the other side would be, we could think Joseph, he has this dream and he feels like God is saying it's significant. And so he's sharing it as a significant dream because he feels like he should. Like that would be obedience to God. He's doing that. But we don't know why. What we do know is that the meaning is clear to everyone. Everyone gets it. The sheaves bow down, and the sun and the moon and the stars bow down. There's not multiple interpretations here. Everyone is hearing this. Even Dad is concerned. It sounds like delusions of grandeur or arrogance, unless Dad holds it, unless it comes true. And then it's something else. What's God's plan? It's so helpful when God shares his plans with us. He tells us what he's doing. It helps us not to feel like life is random we're like, where is God? I don't know. Maybe he's checked out. When he tells us, oh, I'm working, we can trust, oh, God is working in the midst of all this stuff. Isaiah 46, 9-10 says, I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is none like me. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand and I will do all that I please. Or in Amos, another prophet says, 3:7 says, surely the sovereign Lord does nothing without revealing his plan to his servants, the prophets. We know this early in Genesis, things go off the rails and immediately God is saying what he's gonna do. He says, I'm gonna raise up a deliverer. I'm gonna raise up a Messiah. I'm gonna conquer sin and death once and for all. That's what I'm doing. And we know when we get to the end, whether you can make sense of all the imagery in Revelation, we know at the end, God wins. The lion lamb opens the scroll and wins the day and is seated on the throne. And this is what we know, because God has declared it beforehand. So it isn't a parlor game to try to figure out what's coming. It's God's declaration of his promise that he's faithful and will keep his word. Is the dream true? It's a question we could have. And the answer is yes. If you don't know the end of the story, it's yes. Spoiler alert, they all bow down before him. But not today. Not today, actually not for many, many, many years. And in that time, for a lot of Joseph's life, the dream will appear as a mirage or a trick, maybe even a false hope for him as his life goes in the ups and downs and downs and downs. But God has purposed to raise up a deliverer to save Israel, and he will do it. God keeps his promises. We think this is a story about Joseph, but I like how Walter Brueggemann says it. He says, the main character in the drama is Yahweh. Though hidden in the form of a dream, silent and not at all visible, the listener will understand the dream is the unsettling work of Yahweh upon which everything else depends. Without the dream, there'd be no Joseph and no narrative from the perspective of the brothers. Without the dream, there'd be no trouble or conflict for the father. Without the dream, there'd be no grief or loss. The dream sets its own course. Without the dream, the father, brother, dreamer notwithstanding. And in the end, the dream prevails over the tensions of the family. I love that. The dream prevails. God's dream prevails. His plans, his purposes. Our concluding idea, God is working faithfully in the midst of our messy lives. This should be an immense relief to you if you're honest about your life, because we all have these messes we're dealing with in different ways. And God has this dream from Eden on that he would have fruitful followers. He would have people who are wholeheartedly pursuing him and surrendered to him in relationship with him. And like in this story, we blow it. There's so much humanness in the stories. We're so often producing fruit from our family of origin roots, or our reactions, our negative reactions to things, or when we miss it in critical relationships we're in, the damage there. Apart from him, it's not good. But God has a plan. He's downloaded the plan in the story, in the dreams. And his plan is to deliver the world. And despite human evil, God prevails. He works the story for good. That's what we see at the end. What you meant for evil, God has turned to good. But it will get messier before it gets better. So we'll continue on, but let's pray. Jesus, I thank you for how your good news echoes from your story forward and backward throughout all of history and scripture. We hear and see you everywhere. And so in this story too, Jesus, we revel in the good news that in the mess of people's lives, in their human stories, in their struggling, you're faithful and you're working out your promise that you can transform us, that you can redeem us. And you've given yourself to that end and to that purpose. And we know that at the end of all things, that's how it works out, is you have a people that are your own, and you're with them and they're with you. And there's fruit-bearing trees everywhere. And so we say, yes, Jesus, would you come and would you do the healing work in our lives today that we need so that we can look more and more like you and bear fruit, Jesus fruit everywhere. We thank you that you're faithful to do this. We love you.